Welcome in to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football on a Wednesday night. And we have made this hopefully a staple for you each and every week to join us to talk college football like nobody else. Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time, right here at Mark Rogers TV. You see the call in number at 860-5499-3332. And our theme of the night, programs in trouble. Is your football team in trouble? Are they having serious problems? Just look across the nation. There's a pretty long list. I made myself a list, and the reasons vary from program to program. And these are all capable programs in regards to money, resources. They all have what should be in place to be able to compete. But some of them have had a recent downturn. Others have been stumbling and bumbling now for a decade plus. Bobby, I think you know who we're talking about. All right. Again, welcome into Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We will be having a number of guests in tonight. In particular, David Waters from Gators Breakdown is standing by to join us, and also Will Gunter from 107.5 The Game down in Columbia, South Carolina. And of course, you produce the show when it comes right down to it. So I offer up a topic every Wednesday night, but nothing is off the table in college football discussion with you. 860-499-3332. All right, here's my list. And I will remind everyone out there, because this typically happens, you come in here, you have a good time, you jump in the live chat, you start to knock it around with some rival fans and a little trash talk, and you call me and we have a good time, and you leave and you didn't hit that like button. So please smash the like button. Of course, that's on the checklist. And of course, subscribe. Once you subscribe, you hit the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, which is just about every day, and typically multiple times per day, as was the case on this fine Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern time with Ohio State Buckeyes live. Check out that show. And then at 6 o'clock, talking Florida State football. We just concluded that about 45 minutes ago with a crew. They're talking up FSU, where they're on my list. The news has been bad for about 4 years, but actually a bit of an uptick in recruiting for the Noles here in the last few weeks. So Mike Norvell and his staff are pounding the pavement and getting things done. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. 860-499-3332. I believe our crowd is trickling in rather slowly tonight. You can pin that on me. We didn't get a link out there to everyone or announce the show early. So you're not going to have to wait to talk to the voice of college football. That's what that means. Tennessee's at the top of my list. Programs in trouble, struggling, having their issues. We'll give it up for the Vols. They've got to be number one at something. Yes, they do, Bobby. Got to be number one at something on the football field. And until they prove otherwise, this has been the program that, to me, has been the biggest disappointment for the longest period of time. For the past decade, Texas. Yes, Texas is number one. Texas, though, is not on my list. I think they're in pretty good shape. Maybe not necessarily to meet the Texas-type expectations, but to be decent. And they've been decent. They're not on the rails, per se. But think about it. And as we discuss with David Waters of Gators Breakdown, the Florida football team, as they have been on the practice field here for about 10 days, we, again, will have you mull over our question of the night. Is your team in trouble? Maybe we should ask Dave this as well. Dave, how you doing tonight?
Good, Mark. How about you?
I'm doing just fine. Talking about college football teams in trouble, you got a couple in your own division, Tennessee and South Carolina, having their issues.
Yeah, new coaches coming in for this season. Beamer first job, and it's tough. It's tough cutting your teeth in the SEC. So we'll see how that goes. You know, Florida hasn't had a lot of good success, a lot of success in hiring first-time head coaches. You go back to Ron Zook. didn't live up to the expectation. Will Muschamp, good second season. That's all you can really count on. Jim McElwain, pretty good first couple seasons in a down SEC East, and didn't make it past year 3. So it doesn't really work out for Florida, a big time program like Florida. But we'll see. You probably got a lot more time to work on it at a school like Clemson, a school like South Carolina. In the same state as Clemson, who hired a first-time head coach in Dabo Swinney. Worked out pretty well for them after giving him some time after a struggling start there at Clemson. So you got to give him time, of course, Beamer, and looking at that time to figure things out along the way. And then Tennessee, Mark, I find it funny and joking with some Tennessee people that I know. Is like, covering Florida is never boring. I say for Florida, there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation. That's kind of the moniker for Gators Breakdown. You can say the same for Tennessee. Ever since they fired Phil Fulmer, that is just a program, and it makes headline after headline after headline on the field, off the field. Some mild success under Butch Jones. That's about the most success they've had since Phil Fulmer called it quits, and that's really all they can really hang their hat on since then. So a lot there for Heupel to figure out in his first season at Tennessee. And look, it's not going to get any easier. From UCF to Tennessee, he got worse, progressively worse every year at UCF. So that's something I think you really kind of have to look at, on the heels of Scott Frost and playing mostly with his recruits and then getting worse every year he was there. And now I'm going to Tennessee, where you got to face Florida, Georgia, and improving Kentucky program as well.
David, if you're going to win, or if you're going to have to deal with the drama, you might as well win some important games in between. And at least Florida's been able to do that amidst all this drama, whether it be Dan Mullen or Urban Meyer or all the various coaches in between.
Lamar, that's the thing. That's another thing about Tennessee. Look how much they struggle versus Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Don't get me wrong. A lot of programs out there would struggle with that trifecta of teams if you had to play them every year. But besides 2016 beating Florida, and when's the last time they beat Georgia? The Hail Mary.
The Hail Mary.
Jennings. The last time they beat Georgia. So, and Alabama's been 2007, maybe the last one.
Yeah, either Saban's first year, or maybe they have beaten Saban. It might have been either the year before or his first year.
Yeah, 2007 was his first year, right?
Yeah.
So they didn't beat him in 2008 because their only loss was to Utah.
Yeah.
And then 2009 started the run for national championships So 2007, I think, is the last time Tennessee's beat Alabama. So, it's tough, being Tennessee, having to play Alabama every year, Florida, Georgia as well.
Well, before we get on to why we've got you here, David, back to South Carolina. I don't know that there's a program in the country that has lost for decades or underachieved for decades. When I say lost, I don't mean they're Oregon State or anything like that. But in terms of you're geographically in a great place to recruit, you've got a rabid fan base. You're supported. You got 80,000 people in the stadium. You should win at some point. Spurrier did it. Did it at the 7-5 level for most of his time there. Then he kicked it in with 11 wins for 3 consecutive years near the end of his tenure. But other than that, this has been going on for decades, and South Carolina has never won at any substantial level. And I can't think of another program that has resources and a rabid fan base and recruiting, all those 3 things, that can't get it done ever.
Yeah, especially one that's considered a football school. I'd probably put North Carolina maybe in that same regard, but they're putting basketball first, so it's really not the same. But they have resources. They're in a Power 5 conference. And with the right guy, Mac Brown, they can do some things. But they kind of just without Mac Brown have kind of just been the same program they've always been there. So South Carolina, besides Spurrier, he was able to really dial in and hit on some great in-state talent South Carolina had at the time, and get that top in-state talent and go win with it. So. Yeah, look, Steve Spurrier is one of the best college coaches ever. So you could give him credit there for what he did at Florida and what he's done at South Carolina that nobody else has really been able to do. Lou Holtz to a degree as well, but not at the level Spurrier did for 2 to 3 seasons in a row there at South Carolina. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's not as tough as the SEC West when you look at what Tennessee and South Carolina had to deal with, but with the established powers of Florida and Georgia. And I mean, I'll tell you what, Mark, I did some research. We did a study of the program on Dan Mullen about a month ago on Gators Breakdown. And since Dan Mullen's been hired at Florida, Alabama, Georgia, LSU lead the way with wins, with Florida 4th. Kentucky's tied Auburn for 5th since 2018, since Dan Mullen's been hired. So, you look at it, I mean, Kentucky's just been able to find a way to win some games with Mark Stoops, in the last few years.
Yeah, I'm kind of pulling for Kentucky. They just seem to be just a team that can overachieve. And Mark Stoops has found a way to go north, actually. He's the only school in the SEC that consistently goes the other direction for some of his best players to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. All right, let's get down to the Gators. We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown. Did we know or find out what really happened with Eric Gilbert just being on campus or connected to the program for 4 weeks and then I'm leaving again? I'm gone.
Yeah. Never on campus, Mark. The whole plan was for him to come in May as an enrollee in May. Of course, everybody kind of just knows grades are a big issue from his time at LSU. Maybe not doing the things he needed to do in the classroom late in the year there. But that's not the complete story. There's a lot of personal stuff that kind of just got shoved my way without me even really looking at it. Personal stuff that I wouldn't want out there about myself, a family member, anything. So I'm not going to put it out there. Just know I don't want people slamming on the kid saying, he doesn't have the grades or he doesn't care or anything. There are reasons for that. And I'll leave it at that. But there were concerns if he'd be eligible for 2021 for a couple reasons, grades being one. And we didn't even know if the SEC would grant immediate eligibility going in conference from LSU to Florida. Who knows what the NCAA is going to do as well. So, Florida's had some pretty good luck in getting guys eligible right away. But this one was going to be tough, I think, because of the grade concerns and an in-conference transfer. So we don't even know if Gilbert would have been on the field in 2021. You're probably more looking at a 2022 guy anyway. But it's not good for Florida. We've especially on the podcast here, sometimes we get lauded, sometimes we get criticized for how much we look at recruiting. To me, there's too much history out there to prove that you got to recruit at a pretty elite level, especially right now with the way Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia recruit. You have to recruit at an elite level to win consistently. And at the high school level, probably not good enough for what Dan Mullen and staff have done, but they've been able to support that with some really good transfers in the last few years. Van Jefferson, Trevon Grimes, Jonathan Grenard, guys like that. Now you got 5-star DeMarcus Bowman from Clemson, and Eric Gilbert was another one that you could put with that support. And now that's not going to happen. So, we'll see. Maybe Dan Mullen's way of doing it's a little bit different with the way the transfer portal. I think, we're still learning if teams can go out there and consistently win that way. But we know the other way works. We still know if you go out there and recruit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the recruiting rankings. And that's not everything. Don't get me wrong. Mark, I've always put it this way, recruiting doesn't mean you'll win, but you're not winning without it. That's about the simplest way to put it. So we'll see if the different style Dan Mullen's doing it will pay off in the end.
Yeah. And so basically, David, you read my line of questioning here. That's exactly where I was going to take you to the 2022 class, because I looked at where Florida is right now, and it's extremely early, of course, but with a couple signees, or a couple commits, I should say, 2 hard commits, Francois Knowlton, Sivion Ellis, decent prospects, but it looks like Florida's a bit behind in 22. What's the concern? Are there concerns?
Main concern right now is all the quarterbacks that are committing right now. Once one domino fell that didn't go Florida's way, now the dominoes have fallen where other quarterbacks that you thought Florida probably had a good chance on are also going somewhere else. And that's kind of the worry now. I mean, Florida's not in trouble at quarterback. To me, you bring a quarterback in anyway. You bring one in every year because you never know. Speaking of transfers and injuries and all that, Florida numbers wise is pretty set there. You got Emory Jones, Anthony Richardson, Carlos Del Rio, Jalen Kitna. Those last two I just mentioned were two quarterbacks brought in this last class there. So, Florida's set numbers wise, but you always if Anthony Richardson is going to be the guy for the next couple of years, do Del Rio and Kitna stick around? Those two guys come in. They're probably not going to leave together. So one of those guys, you probably say whoever leaves, whoever does not get that job in the future probably is not going to be on the roster in a couple of years. So you always bring in quarterbacks. And it looks like right now, a lot of the targets Florida was in on are committing elsewhere. So, Mark, it is funny that, for all the success Dan Mullen's had, going out there and just getting a big time 5-star quarterback just doesn't seem to be in the cards. It just doesn't seem that way. No matter if it was at Mississippi State after Dak Prescott or all the success he just had with Kyle Trask. It's not like he's lining up 5-star after 5-stars to come to Florida. He's got the reputation of being able to develop and push guys to the league. And we'll probably see him continue to do it now with Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson. And we'll see what happened with Kit and Del Rio. But it is an interesting arc to the Dan Mullen storyline, quarterback storyline of all the success he's had of a Tim Tebow and a Dak Prescott, and even just at the college levels, not guys going on to the NFL, but turning Nick Fitzgerald into something. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald was a triple option quarterback in high school, and Dan Mullen turned him into a serviceable SEC quarterback. Turned Felipe Franks around a bit, made Kyle Trask a 2-star quarterback to now going to be a maybe late first round, second round pick in the NFL. An historic season for a Florida Gator quarterback. When you've had quarterbacks like Danny Werfel, Rex Grossman, and Doug Johnson, Jesse Palmer, Chris Leak, and he's sitting there throwing up historic numbers. So a lot of success there, but it is funny that 5-stars just aren't lining up to play for Dan Mullen.
Yeah, you would think it would completely make sense. That's his reputation, and he's taking far less talent and turning it into something. Yes, it is a bit of a mystery there. All right, David, we know that the Gators hit the field about a week ago. And we know that we're not going to get a whole lot of information out of spring practice, and we've got no spring game. They'll obviously have their scrimmages in the meantime that will be much like what we see in a typical spring game, but it'll be, again, difficult getting information. We'll get some stats and so forth. But for you, let's go offense, defense. It's a big spring for fill in the player, both sides of the ball.
The player. Let's go. I won't go obvious. I won't go Emory Jones there. So I'd say that's the obvious way to go. But we've discussed and talked enough about that. I'll say DeMarcus Bowman, the 5-star transfer from Clemson. I think we're still waiting for clearance if he's going to get play this season. The thought is he will. But it's still a big spring for him to kind of just insert himself, and I think along with the other running backs as well. I think I've heard minor knee injury. Maybe it's not taking full part in the last couple practices, but before that, Mark was living up to that 5-star billing. Yes, the second team and third team, where he should start. He wasn't on the team. Got to earn your way. Got to earn your reps. And but early returns were that he was doing exactly that there. But so as the spring progresses, as he gets back, bounces back from a little maybe minor injury, go back there and insert himself. And when the spring is over, can he be that number one running back? And all the talk for quarterbacks for Dan Mullen, look at running backs. He's never had a running back like this. From his offensive coordinator days at Florida, from his days at Mississippi State, he's never had a running back like this. He's always been a more of a, even his time at Florida the recent couple of years, a more running back by committee approach for Dan Mullen. Now he's got a running back with the skill set of this. Does he finally transfer that to maybe more of a workhorse type of running back? Get your 5-star, your big time playmaker, 20 carries a game. Something he doesn't really like to do with his running backs. I think can DeMarcus Bowman this spring prove to be that type of running back to demand, not go out there and tell the coaches I want 20 carries a game, but his play demands 20 carries a game because he'll bust 5-6 plays a game. So I think that's the big thing for the Florida run game. For the For the defense, I'll go probably not to put any pressure on them, but probably 5-star cornerback, freshman, early enrollee, Jason Marshall. Florida's got to find I think a cornerback that they can really have a lot of confidence in opposite of Kyrie Elam. And Kyrie Elam's going to be an all-SEC cornerback going into this year. But, Florida's got to find another cornerback on the other side opposite of him they can have some confidence in. And, Florida's got to shake that miscommunication, not being set at the snap, all the miscommunication, not being ready in the secondary more so than any other position. That's where they look lost the most. And I think in order to get some confidence back on that side of the ball, they need to find a cornerback opposite Kyrie Elam. Looks like Jason Marshall, the 5-star cornerback, early enrollee, will get every chance there, along with Jaden Hill. I think Florida, if they can find themselves 3 cornerbacks there to really count on and rotate those guys in, that'll do a long way and kind of coming back around to a defense that maybe would consider themselves DBU, because couldn't say that last year.
We talk Gators football with David Waters on a regular basis, pretty much every week, all the time, even going back years and years and years. We used to host a show every week, SEC Breakdown. So, David, I think it's been a long time since I tapped you for this one. College football playoff. Are you an 8-team guy?
Nope, I'm a 4-team guy.
You're a 4-team guy. Why?
I'm a 4-team guy.
Why?
I like to say I'm a 4-team. I'm a college football elitist, Mark. I guess what some people would say it. I'm more for exclusion, not inclusion. I just think the more we get it looking like the NFL, well, why does college football have to look like the NFL? It does not have to be that way. I mean, college football was built on the regular season mattering. Every game out there matters. And in some way, it still will, even with 8 teams. But I think you just kind of get away from the magic of living and dying with every play in the regular season. And you can sit there and say now, well, if you lose a game, back in the day, you could kind of say it too, but not really. You lived and died with every play. But if you lose a game now, it's just like, okay, well, we're still going to win the conference championship. Okay, well, in the SEC, more than likely, you win the conference championship, you're definitely in. If you're in the conference championship game, if you got 8 teams, you're probably in as well. The SEC championship game will mean absolutely nothing with an 18 playoff. Nothing. The SEC championship game might as well just go away.
All right, David. We've got a date coming up where I'm going to make you listen to my proposal for like 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to nail you down. You're going to have to listen to it.
If it goes 8 teams, things will have to change. Like college football in its current form can't stay the same. Like conference championship games probably need to go away.
What if a loss means the difference between not you missing the playoffs if you're in Alabama, and there's only a couple of those, and they might be the only one that's like, okay, forget the Iron Bowl. Who cares? Let's lose, whatever. But if it's the difference between hosting a first-round playoff game and having to go to, I don't know, Madison, Wisconsin in mid-December, Nick Saban might coach that game a little bit different. Yeah, that might not be an enjoyable trip to make for Alabama or Florida going up to Ann Arbor or Seattle, Washington, or wherever in mid-December.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not totally opposed to it. I think we'd get some great matchups that we wouldn't otherwise get. It's just I've always been the thing of I like the fact of college football of having a great season and not getting hot at the right moment. That part of the NFL, the Giants beating the Patriots in the Super Bowl. That whole season, the Patriots were better. And I have liked the college football angle of you get rewarded for having a great season, not a great last 5 weeks of the season. I do like that part of it. I do say the champion had a great season. They really had a great season, not just a great late season performance. So I think there's 2 ways to look at it. You go 8 teams, you definitely earned it. I mean, the schedule will be tough enough. You've definitely earned a national championship. There's just I don't know. I lean towards 4 more. Mark, probably if it was up to me, I'd say let's go back to the BCS, but that's probably another conversation as well.
Oh, man, you're hurting me, Dave. I don't think there's anything that comes out of your mouth that I don't agree with until we went this direction. Oh, my goodness. Good stuff with David Waters from Gators Breakdown, and David is going to have to come back, and he's going to listen to my college football playoff formula. I'm going to make
Sounds
him.
good.
All right, David.
We should do it. I'll just we'll do it that way, and I'll just we'll have live feedback as we go through it.
Absolutely, that would be awesome. You know, you're welcome anytime.
All right, Mark.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. He's the best. Join him, Gators Breakdown. You got to lock it in right there. Awesome stuff. 860, and I was about to read my own phone number, 499 and 3332, 499 3332. There it is. Give me a call. Let's talk some college football. The Rod Farva on the line. I can see him on the live chat breaking it down. 8 teams, no buys. He's got it down. First round games on campus. Very nice. Well done. All right, BGPO Football Funk. Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We see that coming in as well. We've got Will Gunter from the all-new early game standing by to talk a little college football with us. Talk some South Carolina, one of those teams that's had a rough time, as we discussed with David Waters. I made a list of this for various reasons at different levels. Man, Tennessee's got some problems, of course. South Carolina's got some problems. Michigan State, Nebraska, Florida State, Florida, Auburn, for different reasons and to different degrees. Those are the teams that I came up with. Of course, Kansas has problems. We know that the Jayhawks have problems, but I'm talking about programs that have resources, that should have talent, that have, well, for Nebraska, recruiting would be the issue. Recruiting footprint. All right, so let's run them down. And in the meantime, again, you produce the show when it comes right down to it. So latch on to our topic, which is programs with problems. Does your team have a serious problem? If not, you produce the show. We talk about anything related to college football. So you see the number right there at 860-499-3332. So for Tennessee, it amazes me how quickly things can go wrong. And I automatically think Tennessee and I think Arkansas under Brett Bielema. Arkansas needs to get a lot right to win in the SEC West because look at their schedule. Number 2, look at their high school football in Arkansas. Sorry, it's just not as good as it needs to be to compete in that state. So they've got to go to Texas in particular and other places, Louisiana, to build up a football team. They pluck away Brett Bielema. They throw him over $1 million more than what he was making at a team that was at the top of the Big Ten, going to 3 consecutive Rose Bowls. They get him to Arkansas. He wants to play big boy football, and he succeeded to a certain degree, depending on what your expectations for Arkansas football are. He took over a program that was on the skids under John L. Smith, coming off the Bobby Petrino issues and all the chaos that ensued because of Bobby Petrino's off the field issues, because on the field, Bobby Petrino put together a really good Arkansas football team, 2 consecutive seasons there. But we will talk a little bit further about my list of teams and programs that are down. In the meantime, want to talk some college football. We've got a call coming in. We got Swanson wanting to talk a little ACC football. Welcome to MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football.
Hey, Mark, it's DeAndre. How you doing?
Oh, it's DeAndre.
What I say on the thing?
How's it going tonight?
I'm doing good. What did I say? Did I make a mistake and say something wrong?
I'm not hearing you too well. One more time.
I said, did I make a mistake and say the wrong name?
No, I'm reading this off the screen, I guess, incorrectly. Still trying to get used to this this system. I see Auto Scream, Yummy Swanson ACC football. That's how it came out in whatever you stated to the screen in process. There we got it. DeAndre on the phone. Bam.
Okay. Got a question for you.
Yes.
You know, I love football back in the day. So, why has Virginia struggled to be better than what they are compared to what they was under Walsh and some what you saw in the 90s? Why do you think that's been a major issue lately?
Man, DeAndre, for some reason, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Turn the volume up on the mixer board on your Bluetooth slider.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a volume issue. I can hear him loudly enough. I'm just not catching. One more time, DeAndre.
I said, why has Virginia struggled
Virginia
over the last 15 years when it was so good in the 80s and 90s?
That's all I needed to hear was Virginia. I got it. Thank you, man. Tough academic school, so keep that in mind. Difficult place to reel them in. I know that's been an issue. You mentioned George Welsh. Did I hear that name?
Yes, sir.
Of course. Yes. See, the first time I couldn't hear you all the way through. I thought you were talking about Bill Walsh. Yes, George Welsh at Virginia, of course, in the 80s, had the most success. Al Groh recruited well. If you go back and look at his recruiting classes, he did well. Mike London was able to gain the benefits of that and turn in one pretty good season, and then he went downhill. It's a tremendous question. I've got a buddy who is the biggest Virginia fan, and I'm not saying football fan. I'm saying Virginia fan. Everything. He could tell you what the women's tennis team's doing. Everything. He knows everybody. It's unbelievable. And I told him one time when we're talking Virginia football, and this conversation came to mind because he said, well, back when we were great, and I went, great? When were you great? And he's like, well, when we had Sean Moore and Herman Moore. And I said, great? What does great? Define great for me. And I said, you were never great. You were never winning 11 games a year. You were never great. And he's like, come on. And I pull up the AP poll every year, and I'm like, there it is. Look at that. I believe they may have finished in the top 10 once in the history of the program. Maybe. Yeah, it's throw them in the bucket with South Carolina. I'm giving Virginia a pass there. I brought up South Carolina. Yep.
The reason why I bring up that argument because UVA in Maryland is in an area where it's rich of college football talent.
Absolutely.
I think we had this before per capita. I think they had the most NFL players, and it's right there. And I just was wondering, what did you think? Why UVA? But I should also ask about Maryland, because Maryland, since maybe the mid '80s, hasn't really had that continued success. I think they went to a Orange Bowl maybe under Ralph Friedgen, but that's about it that I can remember that Maryland has done in recent years, even before they went over to the Big Ten. I just was wondering, what did you think about that? I mean, excuse me, what were their struggles? Academics, yes, I can understand it, but I was just wondering. South Carolina is just how do you say it? And nobody can figure out why they suck for the last, outside that 4 years they beat Clemson. They really struggled in the mid. I think they were pretty good in the mid '80s when Clemson was on probation, but pretty much they haven't had much luck, and nobody can understand why that has happened. But next question. I would say from 1977 to 1991, Clemson had a pretty good football program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that?
Yes.
Okay, I think for the year they came off probation, I think it was like 6-6 when they finished 9-1-1. Those other 2 years, what would their program would have been if they never went on probation? Would you think they would have been on Miami's level, or I would even say their program would probably equal to Florida State up to probably 89, right?
I think you're making a bit of a leap there. A lot of teams have been on probation. Florida had some. It seemed like Florida was on probation about every other year from the late 70s to 1990. They were on probation all the time. And they seemed to just kind of rebound right off of it and still churn out a 9 or 10 win season. But yeah, probation hurts. I'm not discounting just because Florida was able to kind of just bounce off of it and it didn't seem to matter much.
Well, I said
Man,
I meant Florida.
Florida
I don't know
State,
about that
though.
Florida.
My goodness. To say that Clemson would have been Florida State for those 15 or 20 years, Florida State was consistently playing better football. If you're just talking about consistently winning, Florida State was the #1 football program in the country. Now, people are going to argue and jump in here and talk about Nebraska and Miami. I get it. Not talking about winning national championships, talking about consistently being in the hunt for a national championship. They were the Dallas Cowboys of, the Tom Landry era, going to the NFC championship game like every year. That was Florida State, as you well know, under Bobby Bowden. What is it? 15 consecutive years in the top 4 in the country?
Well, what I was asking, though, was from 1977 to 1991. Now, past that, Florida State definitely was a better program. I mean, for 87 on up to when did they end in 2001, Florida State was by far the better program. But I was just talking about those specific years, because that's when Clemson went on his run, like having really good seasons from 1977 to 1991 or 92. I was picking out those years because there were a lot of 10-win seasons and a lot of 9-1 seasons, 9-1-1 seasons. So I was just looking about that time period.
And you're right. Clemson was definitely a top 15 and arguably a top 10 program for that 15-year stretch. I don't know outside of that national championship season, though, were there any other major bowl appearances? I'm going to say no.
Well, yes, but their tie-in was the Hall of Fame or the Citrus Bowl at that time. And they beat some of the legendary programs in the bowl games, and the bowl games meant a lot more back then compared to what they do now. I mean, they beat Penn State, Oklahoma. As I said, I don't think the only bowl game they lost was to Minnesota in the 80s and 90s. I mean, from that time period that we're talking about, from 1977, I think they lost to Baylor too, to 1991. I think they only lost to Minnesota and Baylor. I mean, they beat Nebraska, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Penn State. Who else did they beat? Ohio State in that time period. And the other two, they was on probation. And then they played Georgia consistently, and they went back and forth on who was winning that game. So, and Georgia was a powerhouse at that time.
I'm not arguing with any of that.
State. Yeah,
I remember it well.
State. So, I was just asking. This is a curiosity question. I mean, and I know people don't like to bring up the team term Clemson, but 89 probably was Clemson's best chance of they beat Florida State. And they went off and lost to Duke 20-17, and then they lost to I think it was 0-3 at that time. Then they lost to Georgia Tech, and they probably would have had a good chance to win the national championship that year, close to it. But then one year they lost to State, and then it was number 3 in the nation. But I think that's the same year they lost to Florida State from the Roosies. So I was just wondering.
The other thing that comes to mind, DeAndre, about Virginia in particular, and Maryland and the rest of the ACC. So if you go back 25, 30, 35 years, the role of college basketball in the sports landscape was so much more important than it is now. The gap between college football and college basketball wasn't what it is now. Right now, you got to be a college basketball junkie to watch college basketball during the regular season. If we asked everybody in the chat to name college basketball players now, they would be like, they could name a couple players on their own team, I'm guessing, if they root for a college basketball team. But otherwise, as I believe from following other sports as well, that college basketball in the 80s and 90s, like those guys were stars. People knew. I could name pretty much 4 of the starting 5 on most teams in the top 25. Like those guys, that just the attention given to college basketball, it wasn't college football, but it was much closer. And nobody cares about college basketball now. It's you just follow your team kind of sport. And therefore, what I think, and of course the ACC, along with the Big East, but the ACC traditionally was the college basketball conference. So I think some of those schools, number one, their culture was We're in a college basketball conference. We're in a basketball conference. That's what we do. We compete in basketball, and it's so much cheaper to compete in basketball. I think they actually would make that financial decision. Do we want to be good at something? Well, instead of going 8-4 in football all the time, and we're going to have to break our back and break the bank just to win 8 games in football. We can probably win 6 consistently, but we can go play for national championships in basketball.
Right. Yeah, because the 80s was loaded with ACC. I mean, I remember when schools like main schools that people don't want to think about now, when Pepperdine and Sal was good. You don't hear about them in college basketball nowadays. I can't tell you the last time I thought about that, but remember how they did their work, UNLV, Long Beach State. So, yes, you're right. But I was just wondering, about Virginia and Clemson's run from 1977 to 1991. I know you say, yeah, they won one national championship, but you look at Florida State's run. It went from 1987 to 2001. Be finishing the top 3. Not saying this on that level, but Clemson was consistently good, and they beat some of the bigger schools that probably had bigger athletic budgets, and in the bowl games. And they played Georgia and Florida State, and I don't think Virginia Tech was that good at that time. I can't remember.
No,
but they played. Yeah, they played who they played, but people only think about Notre Dame. Like when I was a kid, I know how good Notre Dame was, but if you really think about it, Notre Dame was only I'm just guessing. You don't tell me I'm wrong, but from about 1987 to 1992, that's when they were really dominant after the run after Joe Montana left.
Yes,
they was only good those 5 years. So I mean, if you took out the microcosm, they weren't really that good at that time. So these schools take turns learning. That I think in the next maybe 2 or 3 years after DJ leaves, I just could see Clemson taking a little dip, not being in the college football championship, because I know they just signed this quarterback out of Texas, but I'm really not impressed with them. And so I think other teams gonna catch up with Clemson sort of in a way in the next couple of years. But you never know who they're gonna bring in next year or the year after that. But thank you, Mark, man. I give other people a chance to call in, and I appreciate it, bro.
Thank you so much, DeAndre. It's always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Our man DeAndre, BGPO Football Funk, coming online. He always likes to go back in time, which I'm a big fan of. I will do that every time. 860-499-3332. Got Kevin from Dallas chiming in. Good to hear from him. Kevin, how you doing?
Great. How you doing this evening, Mark?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show. What's going on tonight?
Well, I was looking at the topic, and I was going to approach it in 2 ways. One is the state of Florida. And when I say that, I mean it as far as the quote, as far as the bell cows, as far as the University of Florida, Florida State, as well as University of Miami. And I was just, if I was sitting across as far as from a University of Miami fan right now, I think when it's all said and done, if you're patient and wait on deer, I think it'd just be a matter of just biding your time as far as for the other institutions that were named to either fire their coaches or their coaches, quote, going on to greener pastures. Because I don't see Mullen being there multiple years. And as well as Norville, I don't see the guy at Florida State being there after this year. And the one thing that's going to be a boon as far as the state of Florida is the 22 as well as the 23 recruiting class. And if, say, the University of Miami can just get at least half of those guys, because the theme as far as recruiting in the class of 22 and 23 will be legacy kids. You have Earl Little Jr., and which, I mean, hey, it's either Miami or, hey, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, Alabama, the name, as far as the name of another school, as well as Marvin Jones Jr. And then as far as as far as a young man in the 23 class, I think his dad played at University of Miami. Also Booker Pickett Jr., if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, you have legacy kids. Plus, it's just strong as far as the 22 and 23 classes. And if Diaz can do what he can will his magic as far as recruiting, as far as South Florida, as far as the next 2 years, I don't see. And if you beg to differ, beg to differ, Mark, I understand as far as just waiting, as far as on Florida, it's either to fire or Mullen leaving, as well as Florida State firing their coach.
So you think Mike Norvell is going to be gone after this season at Florida State?
Yes, because you can't, as far as cure a gunshot wound with a Band-Aid. And as far as, okay, I'm going to recruit 20 kids, but then I'm going to bring 5 kids as far as the transfer portal. Okay, how long are we going to do this, Mark? Are we going to do this for the next 3 to 5 years? And then at best, you're going to be a nine, I'd say about at least a 9-win season for the next few years. Because you know the competition, the tradition as far as the competition in the state, and plus Clemson is not going anywhere anytime soon. And the only thing that's going to put Clemson back will be a matter of simply Dabo leaving, in which I can't see Dabo leaving unless it's to a pro job. Because the one thing I definitely don't see him doing is going back as far as Alabama history, as far as mama's calling me to go back home, and as far as being the next coach at the University of Alabama, I don't see that. So
Florida State doesn't have a ton of money, and they just paid off Willie Taggart, number one. Number two, this is only his second season. And, of course, it was a pandemic year. They only played 9 games. And I think the Florida State administration understands how bad their football team is and their football program, not just the team, how much dysfunction there is that needs to be corrected. And he's starting to recruit well. Now, the kids have to be signed. We have to wait till December to see if he actually gets the follow through. But he's getting some really good commitments. And again, I'm not going to go crazy over a hot 10-day stretch with Florida State recruiting. But I just, unless he does something stupid off the field, which that's a whole other category, they have to have a disastrous year on the field for him to get fired. They're going to give him a 3rd year.
Okay. I won't argue with you about that, Mark. I could see 3 years with him, maybe another year as far as Mullen, but then, okay, after 3 years, and we're still looking at, say, 9 plus 1. Well, I take that back. I'm not going to say 9 plus, because 9 plus 1 he could stay. But as far as if we're looking at, say, 7 plus 1, or forbid 6 plus 1, then I think this will be a subject, regardless of how shallow as far as the alumni's pockets are in Tallahassee. Then, hey, they're going to have to make a change, because I never would have thought they would have made a change at Auburn. But, hey, they had to use, I guess, they decided to use their funds as far as that Regions Bank money in order to pay off as far as Malzahn. But I'm interested to see as far as the state of Florida. Because if I was Mullen, I would stay there forever, honestly. Because, you could literally, just as back in the day, not leave the state and get, top athletes. But the thing is that for whatever reason, as we talked about before, Mark, used the proverbial, hey, my wife is beautiful, but, as far as the lady that lives on the other side of the fence, she looks better. And that's something that, hey, as a administration, as a fan base, I can't see how they tolerate it more.
Yeah, and he lets it be known. If you read between the lines, it doesn't take a genius to see that he's interested. And that's just not a smart way to do business. But he's for all his genius in putting together an offense and developing quarterbacks, has shown to be less so in terms of dealing with the media and dealing with certain policies. But so basically what I'm getting at all of this, Kevin, is that you think that Miami has a huge opportunity to dominate that state.
If they're patient, Mark, they just have to be patient. And because the one thing, when it's all said and done, if you want to, as the old saying go, catch up with the Joneses, if you want to catch up with, say, the Alabama to Clemson, Ohio State, etc. You know, it's 3 criteria. One, you're going to have staff continuity. You're going to have excellent recruiters. And I have to say this, Mark, you have to have guys that have experience coaching in the SEC. Because really, when it comes to University of Alabama, Mark, and I just have to be honest with you about it, the University of Alabama is what the University of Miami used to be. So you can call the University of Alabama University of Miami 2.0, as in we're going to recruit Dade and Broward County. We're going to, as far as get X amount of kids, as far as out of Texas, X amount of kids out of Georgia. As far as those select kids in state, keep them. And that's it. And that's what the University of Miami did in order to be, quote, the school, you know, through most of the young men that are listeners right now, as far as throughout their young men that are, you know, as far as part of the chat and as far as a part of your program. I mean, most guys that are in their 40s and 50s can recall when the University of Miami was, quote, the standard. But if you're underdog on 30, you don't remember as far as the University of Miami. You don't remember when Florida State was. You don't even remember barely as far as University of Florida, but as far as Miami and Florida State, you don't remember. So if you follow that format, which I think for the first time, the University of Miami followed it this year as far as initially having Travis Williams as far as part of the staff, and I know that he left, but as far as having T-Rod there, you know, as far as having that South Carolina connection as well as Auburn, you have to have that, Mark, in order to be successful, and I think he's made that first move. And in order to be successful, you have to follow that model, and the model that University of Miami set back in the day and what the University of Alabama has capitalized on now.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with any of that because Florida State is so far away from being Florida State, and their issues are even deeper than just having a bad football team right now. This has been going on for 4 years. And the one saving grace that they have is that they don't play in the toughest conference in the world. But way beyond that is what you just pointed out with Miami and why Miami's got the opportunity. Well, Florida State has the same opportunity. They've got all the players that they would ever want within 100 miles or so. So there's always that bailout for any team that's in Florida that you should be able to get talent. Even if you're not recruiting well, you should be able to get top 15 to 25 talent. So Florida State, having that issue. Florida, it's all about Dan Mullen. Does he want to be there? Does he want to be committed to recruiting? Does he want to figure out how to close the gap between he and Georgia on the recruiting path? Because that's, to me, becoming a bigger and bigger concern as this unfolds. Even though they broke through and beat Georgia this past year, they did it basically because they had the right quarterback and a group of receivers that could scare anyone. But those guys are gone. And it just appears as though, you know, unless something drastically changes my mind, I think Georgia's by far the best team in that division, and Florida's going to go back to being second class. And Dan Mullen needs to figure out how to raise his recruiting game because he's going to go 9-3 forever if he doesn't.
Well, along those lines, Mark, 2 questions that I'm at exit stage left. One that you brought up, well, you brought to mind as far as when you were talking about Mullen. And okay, let's go to the cocktail party as far as this year, Georgia, Florida. Say, for instance, if Georgia, say, beat the University of Florida, as the kids would say, mollywop them. Say if it's
do the kids actually use that phrase?
4, yes, as far as
I think that's us using that phrase.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Duly noted. Okay, let's say a 4 to 5 touchdown win as far as the University of Georgia. Would that be the precursor of the administration as well as the fan base saying, Mullen, here's a lovely parting gift lead?
Well, not if they're going 10-2 and they lose by 4 touchdowns to Georgia. He's not going to get fired for that.
Well, okay, but the thing is, okay, if you haven't done this, Mark, look at their schedule as far as this year. I don't see it being a
I don't either.
10-1 or okay.
I don't either.
So I'm looking at more
I don't think they're going to have any kind of banner year at Florida. No, they've got Alabama, they got Georgia. Boom, 2 losses right there. And then beyond that, they always play LSU. Yeah, I see probably 8-4, and they might go 7-5, but 8-4.
And that's where I was going more so, as in 7-5 or 8-4, and including in that 5th loss or that 4th loss being a 4-5 loss. Excuse me, a 4-5 touchdown defeat by Georgia.
If Dan
would that
Mullen,
be enough to get them out?
Well, if he had some equity there, and what I mean by that is if he had victories in the past, seasons in the past that meant something, that meant a lot. If he had won an SEC championship, sure, he did some good things this year. They beat Georgia. They won the division. They gave Alabama its best game of the season. But, if he was David Shaw at Stanford, or somebody who was extremely well respected, and in addition had some big seasons there, so he had some equity in the bank to draw from, and then he had that kind of season, I would say he's safe, he's good, he's fine, he's accomplished all these things, but he hasn't really done that. So therefore, and with his antics and with his clownish act, yes, I could see him out the door with 4 or 5 losses and Georgia putting a hurting on Florida. Yes.
And lastly, Mark, something, I'm throwing a fastball right down the middle, and that is in reference to Ryan Day.
Yeah.
And that is, how long do you see him staying at Ohio State, and what would it take for him to leave Ohio State?
I think that Ryan Day, that's the first time I've gotten into my batting stance in a long time. The fastball coming right down the middle. I would say that Ryan Day is in such a good position that he is not just going to leave for an NFL job. It's going to have to be that he's going to have to be convinced that he's going to be given the kind of resources and whatever personnel decision he's into. Some coaches leave that up to the front office. Others want to have a serious hand in it. Whatever he draws up as his perfect scenario in going to the National Football League, he's going to have to be presented that. Some guys just want to get to the NFL, so they'll take whatever job, and then they go 6-10 twice, and they're out of a job, and that's that. But for Ryan Day, he's at Ohio State. He's at one of the 3 best jobs in the country. And so he's going to need, again, whatever those criteria is for him, that's going to have to be rolled out in front of him. I would think, this is my guess, for him to take an NFL job. And I don't think he goes to any other collegiate job unless they just pay him so much more money than Ohio State's paying him. But that's not going to happen.
Well, as always, a pleasure, Mark. Greatly appreciate as far as the conversation. Take care, and hey, keep doing what you're doing, and hey, look forward to speaking with you again.
Appreciate that, Kevin. Have a good night.
All right.
All right. Now we've got on board one of our favorites going back a number of years here. This guy, always great conversation on college football. Will Gunter, the all-new early game, 107.5, The Game there in Columbia, South Carolina. Will, how's it going tonight?
It's going. We've coached up some soccer, fixed a little dinner, and I'll have to flip some hockey on in a minute. I think it's Capitals Bruins night on NBCSN. So big night over here.
Will, I did not peg you as a hockey guy.
You got to get into. It's been a college basketball. I'm a college basketball guy, and you know what? This is the weird year where I've learned that without fans, when you don't have the Cameron crazies or you don't have fans at basketball games, college basketball is tough to watch, man. And people don't understand. A lot of my background came from working with ESPN and doing basketball recruiting and both ranking and then working with 24/7 Sports. And I love college basketball. I know a lot of those guys still. And it's been impossible. It's really hard. I'm the least fired up for conference tournament time and for March Madness that I've been in a long time, and that kind of stinks. I hate that. Am pretty excited, however, for college football for the start of spring ball, and obviously the news that Alabama, not just Alabama, but the SEC is kind of planning on full capacity stadiums. I know we got a long way to go, and we don't need to make this a political discussion, but I believe that's going to happen, and I think that we're going to have a terrific 2021 football season with that'll kick off here just up the road in Charlotte. Georgia and Clemson will highlight that weekend with a lot of other games.
Yeah, that's right in your neck of the woods. And unless something changes, that is the game of the non-conference slate in college football. And that may turn out to be the game in college football this year. So I got to think around those parts, they're already talking that one up.
Yeah, I mean, it's 365 days a year around here, and obviously Georgia's trying to win a national championship. Hadn't done it since 1980, and Clemson will replace Trevor Lawrence with DJ, as I call him, because my English is bad enough without trying to say his last name. And so you get that game, and it's a big game, honestly, for Clemson with the way things have kind of evolved over the last 12 months and some of the losses that they're going to sustain when you talk about Travis Etienne and they lose a guy yesterday, Darion Kendrick, a defensive back. I think it was yesterday, maybe Monday. My days are running together, but it's a huge game, and I like Georgia, JT Daniels. I personally, being a South Carolina fan and covering South Carolina, got to see him at the end of the season and what he had developed into. And he's going to have some weapons to work with, obviously, in the backfield and at George Pickens at wide receiver. You can always count on Georgia having a good offensive line. We'll see how the defense looks there next year, but kind of a fan of that right now. That game, you got LSU, UCLA that weekend, so that'll be a lot of fun. I think it's Miami, Alabama, which is a throwback game for me personally. I'm a big fan of that. So we got a good opening weekend of college football that we can all kind of look forward to. If we blink, not too far away.
Yeah, Georgia's kind of my off-season champ right now. I've been looking at Georgia football, had some Georgia people on here. We've been running down the roster, running down the position units, and they're just loaded. Like, they didn't even lose much. Like, they usually lose the NFL team, but then they replace it with the other NFL team. Well, they only lost a couple of those guys this time. They're really just bringing almost everybody back, especially on offense. So they're going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see JT Daniels, if he's just a good quarterback or if he can continue to develop and become like a guy that's going to lead a national championship kind of run.
Well, I mean, certainly, and now you've got Brock Vandergriff is coming in, and they're going to have plenty of quarterback competition there with the 5-star there in Vandergriff, and that should make it wildly interesting. JT Daniels is going to be pushed, but the way he played at the end of last year, I think a lot of us thought that when he committed, as long as he was eligible, he'd be the guy from the get-go, and obviously then Jamie Newman opted out, and we really thought he would be the guy, and obviously they went with Dewan Mathis, and then somebody decided Stetson Bennett was the guy they should go to, and things kind of floundered around for a little while. But Daniels played well at the end of the year. It's going to be interesting. I see tonight you got some Gators on the line, and look, that's a program that I'm fascinated to see in the SEC East this year with Emory Jones and with Dan Mullen, who. I mean, what a year for Dan Mullen. I mean, just keep winning. Nobody cares. Nobody cares how you act. Nobody cares if you show up to – I like Dan Mullen. I always thought Dan Mullen at Mississippi State was probably the second best coach in the SEC, given what he was working with at Mississippi State. But I'm fascinated to see Emory Jones and what they look like. Obviously, the loss of Eric Gilbert this past week. We'll see if he ends up in college or junior college based on maybe some things I've heard. That wasn't Dan Mullen's fault, but the bottom line is around here we got some good games that we can start to talk about and look forward to in what I expect to be an actual college football season where we all get to get back into stadiums together and celebrate our team and enjoy the pageantry that is college football.
Will, the more you talk, the more I think we could just camp out in the SEC Eastern Division, because there's storylines all over the place. It's a soap opera there. Yeah, Tennessee in and of themselves is just a mess. We'll see if they got the right AD and the right coach, but they've been making bad hires ever since Phil Fulmer stepped down or was fired. So that's been an issue. South Carolina, I had David Waters from Gators Breakdown on a few minutes ago, because I've always had the thought about South Carolina as, okay, looking over the course of decades, why does this program, and when I say never, of course it's not never, but never win. Well, I can't think of another program in the country, Will, that has as rabid a fan base, resources, and recruiting. They got football players, within 300 to 500 miles of them, and that they can't win.
You know what? It's crazy. I can explain it in a couple different ways. One, keep making bad hires, and it's hard to win football games. When you hire Will Muschamp, that explains a lot. I think part of it, though, college football, in my opinion, and it's not set in stone, but did you ever watch the documentary on the SEC network, Saturdays in the South? Phenomenal documentary. But it talked about traditions and history dating back to the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the hiring of Vince Dooley at Georgia and Pat Dye at Auburn. It talked about even Steve Spurrier going to play at Florida, and then Florida obviously developing into what they were under Steve Spurrier. It talked about Bear Bryant. It even talked about great moments for Kentucky and Mississippi State and I forget his name. I apologize, for Tennessee. Conridge. I want to say Thompson, but I know that's not right. But, it talked about all these moments, and South Carolina doesn't have that history. And I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult in 2020 to take a program that's nothing and turn it into something. And South Carolina's fighting that. We'll see if Shane Beamer, a young guy, a guy that exudes a lot of energy in a lot of ways, kind of reminds me of Dabo Swinney. Now, can he get the program going in that fashion? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But the energy, the charisma, that's a lot of things. I like the person there's what is that? A Bama fan told me Pat Dye was paying players. Buddy Rowe, the SEC, the whole business is paying players. It's not just, it wasn't just Auburn. It's everybody. And go back and watch that documentary again if you haven't. Go back and watch Saturdays in the South. I think it explains a lot of things about the SEC and where it's at. But it also explains, I think, how difficult it is for a program like South Carolina, who 24/7 Sports just put out has one of the top 5 facilities in the country. It is tough, man. It's tough. You've got to be able to build a program with tradition, with history, and there certainly that lacks at South Carolina. You mentioned Tennessee. I'm fascinated to see Tennessee. Josh Heupel, that was not the guy that I thought they'd hire. I thought they'd be able to go a little bit bigger than that. We'll see how he works out in the SEC. I'm not sold on Tennessee. I mean, Mark, you talk about the SEC East. How incredible is it that probably the second most stable program in the SEC behind Georgia is Kentucky. Now, I'm not saying they're the second best program. I'm just saying with Mark Stoops, the tenure he's been there, you see how he's developed that program. We'll still see a lot about what happens with Florida this coming year as they transition from Kyle Trask to Emory Jones. Remember, Florida's losing to Kentucky up in Lexington 2 years ago, and Felipe Franks gets hurt. And they probably lose that game. If they lose that game to Kentucky and Felipe Franks stays on as quarterback, what's our discussion about Dan Mullen here on March of 2021?
Exactly. It's quite a bit different, or maybe it's non-existent. But yeah, to top off the storylines, we talked about the drama, and you took us through it. But Dan Mullen, to me, if we were sitting here a year ago, I'm defending Dan Mullen. I had people come on here and go crazy about Dan Mullen. What has he ever won? And I'm like, well, look at what he's doing at Florida. He's building a winner. They're getting better by the year. Look at what he did at Mississippi State. Sure, he's a little quirky. He says some things that are a little bit of oddball, but it's all harmless. Well, this is the first year that it wasn't harmless. It was buffoonery at times.
You know, I think what's interesting with Dan Mullen is you already saw it this year where he's pulling the same stunt he pulled at Mississippi State, but now it's the NFL. Well, my name's in place for the Falcons. My name's in place for the Jets. You can't do that at Florida, not when you're competing against some of the schools that you've got to compete against to recruit. You can't have your name constantly floated out for other jobs. Keeping Todd Grantham, I think is obviously very interesting. Look, I'm a huge Torian Gray fan. He came to South Carolina. He's already landed South Carolina, a pretty good defensive back recruit out of Hallandale, Florida, and Anthony Rose. He had him in the game for Sam McCall, who obviously just committed to Florida State this past weekend or the end of last week. I really like Torian Gray, but he keeps Todd Grantham, gets rid of Ron English and Torian Gray. And I think that defense is going to continue to be fascinating to watch. Dan Mullen's shown what he can do with offenses at Mississippi State. And now he's landing better players at Florida. So I think the offense will continue to be dynamic. The question is what does that defense looks like as we continue down that path if it's Todd Grantham leading the way?
So Jimbo was hired to get something done at Texas A&M that nobody gets done, and that's beat Nick Saban consistently or a portion of the time. Gus Malzahn, actually, despite all of his failures of losing 4 and 5 games a year, did about as well as anyone has at beating Saban at least 3 times. So do you think Jimbo's on the cusp of breaking through?
I think they're all in a bubble right behind Alabama. Does Ed Orgeron bounce back this year? That roster is loaded. Miles Brennan will be back. They've got good players. They're not lacking for talent. Look at their recruiting rankings. Texas A&M is going to be really good. Obviously, they'll break in. I think it's Harrison Beck will be the quarterback this year for them. Isaiah Spiller is back at running back, and that's going to make things very interesting. They'll be a dynamic offensive team. I was at Williams-Brice Stadium when they came in and stomped a mud hole in the Gamecocks back in the end of November or the beginning of November, I think. And so I think Jimbo's good, but is Jimbo a generational quarterback guy? Is he a Jameis Winston guy? If it's not for Jameis Winston, are we discussing Jimbo Fisher as a national championship type coach? There's still a lot left there to be proved with Jimbo Fisher. But at the same time, look at who he's going against. I mean, are you still buying Ed Orgeron with an incredible roster, but with what he's got? Are you buying Brian Harsin at Auburn to come in? You mentioned it. Gus Malzahn was always on the hot seat, but did good things. Lane Kiffin at Mississippi State. At Mississippi, what's he going to do? I'm not buying Mike Leach at Mississippi State. So you look down that division and Sam Pittman fine at Arkansas. Okay, that was a 1-year thing. Can it be sustained? I don't know about that. So when you look at the rest of that division, it would certainly seem to me that Jimbo is in place to become the team that challenges Alabama. But I don't think they're as talented as LSU. And if you're not as talented as LSU, are we just waiting on LSU to fire Ed Orgeron and go out and hire a PJ Fleck or, some other guy that turns them back into a national juggernaut? Because there's a lot of talent sitting there in Baton Rouge.
Will Gunter, 107.5 The Game, the all-new early game is his show each and every weekday. Will, we know that you love the sport. You follow as much as you possibly can across the nation. You're locked in there at South Carolina and the SEC, but you keep tabs on everything, watch as much as possible. What kind of off-season vibes are you getting across the country in regards to, again, it all comes down to, we know who owns these conferences, Oklahoma, Ohio State. We talked to SEC already. Man, is there anybody out there who can shake this thing up?
Yeah, I don't know. Sarkisian at Texas, what is he able to go in and do? Steve Sarkisian was mentioned prominently, obviously, for South Carolina early on. And to be honest, I wasn't a fan. I'm not a fan of guys that come from that Alabama system because the amount of talent that you tend to work with. And can he go to Texas and make things just strike right off the bat? I think that's kind of fascinating. Uh, you look at the Pac-12, and I'm not saying that they're a national title contender, but go back and look at the college football playoff. You've got typically your what ends up being your big three. It's Clemson, it's Alabama, it's Oklahoma, it's Ohio State. Those three of those four typically like to find their way in, and then we get the rando, as we'd call it, the random girl at the bar who shows up looking really good that night, and that would be Notre Dame, that would be Michigan State, that would be Washington, that kind of get in there and make an appearance. Is Oregon that school? Look at the rest of the Pac-12, and can they run the table? Is Mario Cristobal that guy? Is he the next up-and-coming guy that outside of the SEC, outside of Clemson, outside of Ohio State, and outside of Oklahoma that can make that run? I'm as passionate as anybody now. I've had enough. It's time to expand the playoff. Get it to 8 teams. I realize there's going to be blowouts. I realize that this year it's not what we always want, but give me a little bit more in terms of a college football playoff, because upsets do happen. In a one-game scenario, upsets happen. That's the way that some of these coaches can operate. And, is there a team that can get in there? Yeah, I do like Oregon, but is Mario Cristobal seasoned enough to run the table? He's got to play Ohio State this year. He's got to go to Columbus. Are you going to take Oregon in Columbus? And is the Pac-12 strong enough that if they have one loss, they're going to be able to get in? I have no idea about that.
Yeah, and I talked to an Iowa State guy that really knew his stuff, and we went through the offense and defense there, and Iowa State's not going to sustain this. I am rooting for them. That would be great. I just don't see it, but they pretty much bring back a team that won the Fiesta Bowl, and they're fully loaded to give it a crack at Oklahoma to get things done and make and break up the party.
Yeah, don't buy those bowl games, man.
Okay.
Lamar said, and I'm with this. Bowl games are becoming as irrelevant as anything we have in college sports, because there's no reason. If we have a son, if you have a son, if I have a son, and you're not playing in the college football playoff game, and that son is projected as a top 100 draft pick, would you tell him to play in the game? I would never tell. Look, college is great. There's a young man people might be familiar with watching this, Marcus Lattimore, who was going to be a top 2-round pick at from South Carolina, running back in the early part of last decade. I don't know what we're calling it, 2010s. Gets hurt, never plays it down in the NFL. You're going to run that risk? Are you going to run that risk in a meaningless exhibition bowl game for a school that's not giving you a dime? The only way you keep some of these kids in school now or to play these bowl games is by expanding the college football playoff. I don't put stock in bowl games anymore. I think that certain schools can build upon it if you're playing in like a Belk Bowl. And I'll give you the example. South Carolina under Will Muschamp went and played in the Belk Bowl against a Virginia team that they probably should have beaten. They ended up losing 28-0. It was an awful appearance. I was there. They served a lot of Crown Royal in the club suite. So thankfully, I don't remember the second half. But what happened in that game was Will Muschamp never recovered. He absolutely never recovered, and would go on the remainder of his tenure would be 6-16. And now he's the most well-paid analyst probably in the country at $300,000 at Georgia, which is phenomenal. But I don't know what these bowl games are going to end up being, and I think you have to expand the playoffs. So when people say, well, they won this bowl game or they did this in a bowl game, I don't know if I'm willing to buy that anymore.
Well, I'm just looking at what Matt Campbell's built there, which is remarkable. It's taking a 2 or 3 win program and making it a 7 or 8 win program. I had my doubts about whether he could continue that trajectory. And then last year they had a really nice season. They took Oklahoma to the final possession of a Big 12 championship game. And now they've lined up a situation in which if they can beat Oklahoma head to head, they're probably the best team in the conference. And maybe they get that 1 year where they can put it all together. And they've got a very veteran team. Brees Hall's one of the best backs in the nation. Brock Purdy at quarterback. Defense is stacked that they can possibly win a fairly marginal conference and, again, break up the party.
Yeah, again, I think you got to remember they were talking about them knocking off Oklahoma early on when Spencer Rattler was still kind of finding his footing and learning his way, and the game was in Ames, and and nobody strolls into Ames, Iowa, and walks out with a victory, obviously, but the bottom line is, Oklahoma. I don't think they beat Alabama. You say things and people go, oh, Gunner said this. But I think Spencer Rattler and Oklahoma at the end of the year give Alabama a game that's worth watching. I think Alabama pulls away late, but I think they give Alabama a game worth watching. I think that would have been right. I could be wrong. I don't have this was obviously 2 months ago that I was having this conversation on my radio show. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong out there, Oklahoma would have been the 8th seed, I think, and Bama was the 1. I think that's where we were at there at that time. But I can tell you, what I will promise you this, Oklahoma would have given Alabama a better game than what Notre Dame gave them. Alabama would have given Oklahoma a much better game than what Notre Dame gave Alabama. And that's the fun part of a 1-game playoff. You would have had Oklahoma with a puncher's chance to beat Alabama in a 1-game scenario. And I like Spencer Rattler.
I do too. I think he made a few mistakes early on. He played really well. If you really look at what he did out there, he wasn't playing horribly. He made key mistakes. He cleaned it up. He's a freshman. He cleaned it up. He played much better down the stretch. Oklahoma was, in a scenario in which we both are touting, Oklahoma would have been, as a Big 12 champion in the playoff, a team that was red hot with 8 consecutive wins, and we would have seen the other factor in all this that is on the side of our side of promoting an expanded playoff is you take a team that might be a completely different team than they were the first couple of weeks of September. You take them in December and you're getting one of the 4, 5, or 6 best teams in the country when maybe their record shows that they're the 10th or 12th best team, but that was a different team in September. And they've matured and their quarterback's matured and he's ready to go. And they've just they're ready to play now.
They'll be interesting. I'm excited to see them. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of I'll have to look it up real quick. What their non-conference schedule is early on. I don't know if they've got somebody that we get excited to watch them play early on. I feel like they get somebody, but
you're going to get excited. I've got it in here. You're going to get excited if you're just nostalgic.
Oh, Nebraska. They play Nebraska. Play Nebraska. That's right. I knew they had somebody. I apologize. A lot of information.
I'll get excited about seeing the uniforms on the field together and say, oh yeah, I remember when these games used to be epic, but it's probably not going to turn into anything.
Beat Nebraska like they stole something, and we're still going to claim that Scott Frost is building something in Nebraska, and it's going to be good.
Yeah. Will Gunter, 107.5, The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. The all-new early game is his show. Will, anything else before we let you go?
I think that's right. I think that's it. Locally here, Clemson has started fall camp. It's fall camp. I wish it was fall camp. They've started spring practice. They're praising on their boy DJ, who's again last name I can't pronounce. Justin Ross is moving to slot receiver. They're fired up about that. They say they got the best receiving core in the nation. South Carolina gets underway March 24th. They're going to wrap up April 24th, I think. And we're excited. I'm excited to see him. Shane Beamer coming from that Oklahoma program and what he can do, because I do think, and I see you got a lot of Gators on here tonight, apparently having a good time. I do think this SEC East is wide open outside of Georgia. I think that I'm fascinated to see where Dan Mullen is in 2 or 3 years, and if Florida still wants to keep him around, and I think they will. But I also don't know if Dan Mullen's the guy that gets them over the top, over the hump, to where they want to be. Kyle Trask, again, I think about it again now. If Felipe Franks does not, they were down 11, 21, 10, I think. It was something like that. They were down double digits. Felipe Franks gets hurt in that game in Kentucky 2 years ago. And if so, we never see Kyle Trask. And I don't know if Florida's the same without him. And Trask turned out to be a heck of a quarterback, and obviously a lot of skill guys. Kadarius Toney was phenomenal. And we'll see now that they don't happen to have Eric Gilbert. But I think that East for the SEC is wide open. The ACC, Miami, Derek King should be back, should be healthy. Excited to see them against Alabama. Can they challenge Clemson? Keep an eye on North Carolina. Sam Howell's back. They got some players there. I know they lost a lot to the NFL, so the ACC maybe is a little bit more exciting. And then the Big Ten, Michigan. I guess we're all just waiting to see what happens with Jim Harbaugh, and everybody's chasing Ohio State. We'll see if Wisconsin is any better, Penn State, what they can do. I think it's going to be an exciting year. I just can sit here on March 3rd and feel like I can tell you, you're going to see Clemson, you're going to see Alabama, and you're going to see one of Oklahoma or Ohio State, and then we'll throw in that fourth rando team again for the college football playoff. It's time to expand.
Good stuff with Will Gunter. All I'm thinking of is if Felipe Franks is listening in tonight, he's pretty offended.
He's unnecessary shrapnel tonight. He was having a good night. He was probably hanging out with his girlfriend. He's thinking he's going to get drafted, and I've brought him down. He's sorry. You were not good, buddy. You were not good. You just, whew. And I say that as a South Carolina fan who you made your career against in the swamp and started the downfall of Muschamp's career. But yeah, if it wasn't for Kyle Trask, Florida fans might be having a different feeling tonight on their boy Dan Mullen.
All right, good stuff with Will Gunter again, 107.5. The Game there in Columbia, South Carolina. Will, it's always a pleasure. You know you're always welcome.
Anytime. Glad you text me. We'll catch up again soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.
All right, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Before I get to this next call, keep in mind we're here every day talking college football, so tell your friends. I say this all the time. If you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the call-in shows, if you enjoy the live chat, what do? Share the links out there on social media and bring a whole lot of other people in with you. All right, there's the schedule coming up here on Thursday. In terms of records, we've got a whole lot more in store for you than that. But Thursday at 4 o'clock Eastern time, we got Miami Hurricanes live right here. And then Friday, a call-in show. So keep it locked in here. And Miami fans had quite a bit to say to me recently after we had Uncle Lou on. So I thought I would tackle those comments head on. I'm never running from anyone. You know that. So a number of Miami fans not happy with me, not happy with Uncle Lou, but I will take the bullets and we'll do a live reaction show on the Miami channel to be announced. All right. Got our guy, David Greenshield, Buckeye fan on the line.
Well, Mark Rogers, I would say Miami fans haven't been happy with Ohio State for about 18 years. So
yeah, for some reason.
That's a different discussion.
Yep.
For some reason. I think there was a game some time ago that they were still quite upset about. But
well, Hugh and I watched it. I don't know that a lot of other people did, but yeah.
Well, I think there was a couple people that were watching
Maybe.
it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But, just a couple. All right, Mark Rogers. Well, I wanted to give you a call. I listened to the Buckeye show, and on the Buckeye show last week, you guys were talking, and, Dace, you were on his podcast, and he was complaining about some of the coaching hires that Harbaugh had made.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys had discussed this, but to throw Dace a bone, I did think they made one good hire in Mike Hart, because we've talked about that they haven't been able to, really recruit a stud running back up there. So, that could be one of the few good hires that Harbaugh had. What do you think?
I think I said exactly the same thing. I don't believe it was. Okay. It was not today. It was last week. I was running through the hires basically as I lined them all up. David, no one other than Mike Hart has been hired at Michigan on the coaching staff in these 6 hires that has previously coached that position. Other than Mike Hart,
Right.
I just find that a bit curious. It seems a bit, if you're really good at coaching football, if you're smart, if you're a motivator, if you're a teacher, an instructor, I'm a big believer that you don't need to hire somebody who exactly fits the resume. I would rather hire really sharp, motivated, energetic, ethical people that have skill sets for life and that are really good at anything almost. And then you fit them into the job. But there has to be some match to a certain extent, of course. And I just find it a bit odd that everybody they hired outside of Mike Hart had never coached the position that they're being hired to coach.
Right.
And then not only that, 3 of them have to do it like spur of the moment, like walk on campus, go to spring practice and start coaching some position that they've never coached before. But I did mention, as you have here, that I believe that Mike Hart was a good pickup. Yep.
Well, I mean, it's the last great really running back that I remember them not really ever having. You know, if you stop to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've had some like okay ones we've talked about in the Harbaugh era, but no standout. Let's put it that way. And the one thing that I would say, and you know, Dace has talked about the players as problems in development of players, which I agree with. I think that they've recruited decent enough to where their record should be better than, you know, where it is compared to where they're recruiting at. But when it comes to that player development, the thing that I would do is I would always try, or at least try to find coaches that have developed good players in the past. You know, a coach that's developed a few players into All-Americans or first-round draft picks. Now, I'm not saying that's always easy to find. I get it. But I would move heaven and earth to find the coaches that I know that at least have somewhat of a track record of at least putting guys into the NFL or at least turning them into either all-conference, all-American type players so you can see, okay, this guy has a track record of doing it, or at least somewhat of a track record. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
and
I mean,
those guys don't.
No, go ahead. Right. That's the problem. That's why, you know, being an Ohio State fan, guys like Larry Johnson, Brian Hartline, obviously we've seen what Ryan Day has done with the last couple quarterbacks. So, you know, I you know, that eventually just grows and only helps you, you know, on the recruiting trail long term. One thing I wanted to get to, I had this conversation with Uncle Lou the other night, and I want to throw this out there to you. And I asked it to him, but obviously he's, you know, got his bias being a Georgia fan. If you think about it, LSU has played in 4 national championship games in the last 20 years and won 3 of them, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
By the way, how do they get to play every... Mark, can I ask you a question? Have you ever asked LSU people why they get to play every national championship game in the Superdome?
03, yes, was there. 07, yes, was there. 2011, yes, was there. 2019, they played the semifinal. Where was the national championship game in 19 against Clemson? It was there, right?
Yeah.
Where was
all 4?
Where was the Oklahoma game? That was at the Peach Bowl, right? In Atlanta? The semifinal game.
Yeah.
They were both in domes. Okay.
Yeah.
That is crazy, isn't it? Yeah. All 4 of them.
Yeah. I said that for years. I said that it would be nice if the Buckeyes could play the national championship game at Cleveland Brown Stadium. But, you know, that's not going to happen. But, you know, I understand. In any case, I asked him this bottom line question. So, I mean, you look at the history of LSU. I mean, I think in the last 20 years, they've won the second most national championships, right? 3? I don't think there's another program with 3.
They're it.
If I'm not mistaken.
Clemson, too. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So, my question to Uncle Lou, and I'll throw it out to you. Now, obviously, he's got his biases. But if you had to bet within the next 5 years, who is more likely to win a national championship, Georgia or LSU?
So there's something to be said
What do you say?
for having a head coach who has the experience and has shown that regardless of how we rate and evaluate that LSU team just being over the top loaded offensively, especially, that the head coach, to me, Ed Ogeron is still somewhat of an unknown factor. He hasn't sustained winning for us to know this guy's a great coach. But he at least did it. He experienced it. He took a team through a gauntlet of a schedule, conference championship game, through 2 playoff games, boom, got it done. Again, regardless of how much more talented and skilled they were than the teams that they played. I'm still going to say Georgia.
Okay. And your rationale would be?
My rationale is that they're recruiting slightly better and they play in the better division to get it done.
Okay.
They're going to have
that
more
was
chances.
Uncle Lou's reasoning.
They're going to have more chances.
That was right. I agree. Well, that was Uncle Lou's reasoning. I was just going to say that, Mark. He didn't mention the recruiting. I thought he might throw that out there. He said because, LSU would theoretically have to beat Alabama on their side, obviously. And then, like they did in 19, also have to beat Georgia in the championship game. Whereas Georgia, a lot of years wouldn't have LSU on the crossover or Alabama on the crossover, might skip them, and then just would have to wait to play them in the championship game.
I agree. And we don't know. So I expect LSU to bounce back. They have one of the 5 or 6 most talented rosters in the country. So that's what I expect.
Mm-hmm.
But what has LSU done going back to 2011, aside from 2019? They've lost 3 or 4 games every year. And Georgia keeps knocking on the door. So I'm taking anytime I'm going to be offered a question like that, I tend to take probabilities and kind of view it that way.
Well, if you think about it, if both programs were similar in a lot of instances to where they both send a lot of players to the NFL and both at multiple different positions, but LSU got the most obvious position right in 2019 with Joe Burrow having the greatest season a college quarterback has had statistically, and Georgia, what Georgia has not had in the Kirby Smart era, top-notch quarterback. So, until they get that right, until maybe they find somebody close to at least to Joe Burrow, I mean, that's the bottom line, right?
And choose to play him.
Right. And choose to play him and develop him. Yeah, I would agree. Hey, one more last thing, and maybe you can throw this out there for the Buckeye talk, Mark. I got one more Buckeye question to throw out to you. Better Buckeye defense for a single season, 1996 or 2002?
And not because they won a national championship, 2002. I believe that every Ohio State defender that started on that defense didn't just make an NFL roster. They played time in the NFL. They either were a starter in the NFL or they were on a roster for a few years and played. I believe I've gone through the exercise of looking at that team player by player defensively, because in the aftermath of that game, in the years following, you probably heard these kind of conversations about how much more talented Miami was. That Ohio State team got talked about like they were some MAC school. It was ridiculous the way they were discussed. And they were loaded too. They had 3 NFL receivers. Sure. They had most of their starters along the offensive line played in the NFL. Sure, the quarterback was not good at the next level, and the running back played himself out of shape and out of a possibility of doing anything in the NFL. But the defense was loaded and stacked, and the wide receivers were just as good as Miami's as a core. Something in that range. So I'm going to go 0-2. I'm thinking Tim Anderson and Donnie Nicky, and I'm going across the field. Yeah.
The late Will Smith, who was having a really
absolutely.
good NFL career.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Dawes. Of course, Chris Gamble played 10 years in the NFL. I would tend to agree, although that 96 defense, to have all-timers like Vrabel, Andy Katzenmoyer, still is probably one of the 4 or 5 best linebackers I've ever seen at Ohio State. And Sean Springs, for a season, nobody threw the ball his way. So, I mean, other than that one play with Ty Streets, so that defense was not all bad. It was so good that Antoine Winfield played nickel, so that was close. That's a close call.
It is.
If you ever get a chance, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
so.
the Stars are at a higher end on the collegiate scale and the NFL scale for the 96 team. Antoine Winfield, right, I don't think gets his due outside of Ohio State circles. He's one of the best college football players I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, he played 17 years in the NFL, Mark. And then Sean Springs played like 9 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And, Vrabel had a great NFL career. And Andy Katzenmoyer could have been good if he didn't have a bad neck injury. So, yeah, it's close. But I think because of the 0-2 kind of achieving the ultimate goal, too, you'd have to probably maybe give them the slight edge as well.
I was also trying to, as you were discussing this, try to go through the 5 or 6 most difficult opponents to see if there was a letdown by either one where they gave up 35 points or anything like that. And there's really not that game for either one of them.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that because of the fact that, and, they gave up 24 points to a great Miami offense. I mean, they actually only gave up 17 points in regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And they won a lot of games that year because of their defense, 13-7, 14-9, 10-6. You go back and look at some of those scores. I mean, and I think the thing that Mark kind of painted that team a little bit out of people's eyes is Tressel's style of play. That Tressel ball at the time where I think people, and it was also college football was different. You could kind of win with that style at that time too. Football was just played differently, as you've talked about before.
Yep.
So I think he could kind of adjust and do that.
Absolutely.
Well, as always, a pleasure, Mark Rogers.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the call. Have a good night.
Yep. Take care.
Transitioning from one David to another. David Knight, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. That is so generous of you. We appreciate that. And just to remind everyone, this show, this effort, this channel, the whole deal is basically supported by you when it comes right down to it, whether that is your individual contribution right here on the super chat, or you can hit me up at Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App. And then also keep into consideration whether you own a business or you know of somebody else who owns a business that you have direct contact with. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. We need sponsors for these shows. All right. The callers are lining up here. Boy, you guys aren't going to let me have dinner tonight, are you?
Hey, guys. Hey, it's me, blaming on them again.
All right. That I don't know if that was a prank, but if it wasn't, it was just going to be way too loud for my ears regardless. So either calm yourself down and, we'll get you back on the show, or, have a good night and go prank somebody else. All right. See, I just need to keep track of the numbers now is the trick. All right. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am doing just fine. We got Michael on the line. Yeah.
Yeah, I rarely talk about this team, but I'm going to have to still give my vote for the 2006 Ohio State defense.
The 96 defense. Are you talking the 06
No.
defense?
The 06 defense.
Yeah.
That season, I was just going back through it and stuff. Easily could have 7 or 8 shutouts.
Yeah, they
Easy.
also gave
And they
up
gave
41 points to Florida and 39 to Michigan.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you expected that because those teams with high scoring offenses that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Was I?
But I don't know that Michigan
No,
was
I was
scoring
looking-
39 points against everyone, and they really struggled the last two games of that season with a national championship on the line.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the team I'd have to go with because I mean, Laura Knives was a beast that year, and like the other teams and stuff like that. No, they was averaging over 30 a game when you combine it. They put up 40 4 times, and then and to the other games they was only scored less than 30 points like 4 times that year. Everything else they was in the 30. I'm on up. So they was a high potent offense that year too. When they had Chad Haney and Mike Hart.
Oh yeah, I remember that game awfully well. But yeah, I cannot
No, I
give
mean,
it to
I'm talking about the Michigan.
Yeah, you're talking
Go
about.
ahead, sorry.
You're talking about the 06 Michigan Ohio State game.
Yeah, I'm just going with that's who I would look for. I think the 96 team was all right, but I think they could have pitched out shutouts that year and stuff like that. So that's who I would vote for. So.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, let me ask you this, Mark. Mark, what would you rate that defense that year then?
The
For Ohio
06
State.
the 06 Ohio State defense. Man, I'm getting
Yeah.
myself re-familiarized with them. Vernon Golston was a bust in the NFL, but he had a great college career. He had a great stretch run in 07 that set him up to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Quinn Pitcock, he was a big recruit. Jay Richardson, Alex Barrow, down the line. So the defensive line, oh my goodness, that defensive line does not compare to the 96 and 02 teams.
No, yeah, but didn't the 02 team like barely squeak out wins that year though too? If I'm not mistaken, where the offense had to bail them out a few times that year. If I'm not mistaken,
the 02 team.
Yeah.
No. The 02 team bailed out the offense. The offense was marginal. The 02 team won 19-14, 13-7, 14-9, 10-6 against your Purdue Boilermakers.
Yeah, and a game they should have been pass interference. But hey, you can't cry over spoiled milk on that one though. Should have tackled Michael Jenkins.
I'm looking at two.
But I digress, though.
I'm looking at two outstanding NFL players on the 06 roster. In James Laurinaitis, as you mentioned, and Malcolm Jenkins, who's still in the NFL remarkably. And Kurt Coleman was a really good NFL player, and he was a good, of course, very good all Big Ten conference player. Yeah, their defensive line doesn't compete with the other two.
Yeah, but what was it about that defensive team, though, that year in 06, where they have averaged to give it up, like, what, a touchdown a game until the last 2 games of the season compared to the other? That's where I'm going on with the 2016, because they've given up, like, a touchdown a game on defense.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I know that they played Texas on the road early in the season. Texas was highly regarded, was the number 2 team in the country. They only gave up a touchdown. Yeah, they really did not have a poor defensive game. They didn't even have a marginal defensive game the entire season. I'm looking at the scores and they're starting to come back to me. They're watching all these games. Yes, they played extremely well until the last 2 games of the season. They were a dominant defense. I'm going to say that the best offense they played before the final 2 games was Texas, and that was a Major Applewhite Texas team. that was post Vince Young.
That wouldn't.
Or was that Colt
Yeah,
McCoy already in
yeah, that was-
06, 7, 8? Yeah, it would have been his 3 years starting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Colt McCoy,
Mm-hmm.
who turned out to be a great quarterback at the collegiate level, but he was just starting his starting assignment. And Penn State was really good. They were good. They weren't.
Yeah, one that was Hackenberg. Wasn't Christian Hackenberg the quarterback then?
No. This was way before Christian Hackenberg. Hackenberg was
Okay,
2012, 13 in that range. This was Anthony Morelli. Yes, Daryl Clark, I should say, mixing him up with somebody else, was the backup who eventually led Penn State to a Rose Bowl and a Big Ten championship.
Mm-hmm.
The Iowa team was one of the better teams that they played, but yeah, they didn't run into that level of personnel until Michigan and Florida, and they got scorched for 39 and 41 points. That national championship game was just not pretty on either side of the ball for the Buckeyes. So, yeah.
But no, that's what I was going to say. I was just going to say, yeah, but okay, so what would you rank him then? Is the best defense of all time then for the 2006 season?
I'm sorry on that, Michael. Again?
All right. I was saying, where would you rank? Okay, obviously you're probably going to have number 3 with 96 and 2002, but of all the defenses of all time, where would you have to rank him at in the last 20 years? 20 to 25 years.
The 06 Ohio State defense?
The 06.
Against the rest of the Ohio State defenses?
Or no, maybe like the last 25 years.
Of Ohio State defenses, just Ohio State.
Yes.
I wouldn't rank them extremely high. I think the 05 defense was better. I think the 02 defense was defense. The 98 defense was better. The 96 defense was better. The 14 defense was better. The 15 defense was better.
Okay,
the 19 defense was better. I'll put them about 10th.
Ask you this, Mark. Do you rank them because of what they do, or basically the results of like what they do, like obviously what they give up, like scoring wise and stuff like that? What do you consistently rank? How do you rank them usually? Does scoring? Do you figure scoring into it too?
I'm ranking these defenses based on how they performed on the field first and foremost, but I'm also taking their defensive personnel into account in regards to how great did these players become, but more so what were they at the time. But looking at the points and the yardage and the production given up versus the quality of the opponent.
And I go with that, but I figure with the way they was dominating most of the 2006 season, why can't you make a case for me? See what I'm saying?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They're not as good as 90.
I think 96, 98, 02, 05, maybe the 09 defense possibly. Yeah, that defense was really good. And then certainly the 14 and 15 defenses and the 19 defense. And again, now that you start to look at, you can't compare statistics once you start to break into the last 5 or 6 years of college football, because the offenses have become so prolific that you can't compare defensive metrics. The Rod Favre basically went through the same seasons I did, and he's on the same wavelength as I am.
Yeah. This is weird, but I don't know why you guys are thinking that like I was talking with a few the other day, they think that the 2016 one that I'm like, yeah, they really was on defense and stuff till they got blitzed. I mean, for the last 2 games of the season, but I don't know. I try to figure out like why is nobody considering 2006? Anyway, though, thanks for taking my time, Mark. Have a great night.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Let's take a few more phone calls for the night here. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
This is Steven.
Hello, Marcus. This is Yakov 22.
Yakov 22. What's going on?
Yes, well, Mark, I'm just having a good night here. I'm enjoying the show. And I thought I'd call in for a second here.
Absolutely. What's up?
Well, yeah, we're doing well. But I appreciate yesterday when you were on with Pittsfield Beat, I made it in just the nick of time to make my little comment there saying I really believe that you two, if there was such thing as a Mount Rushmore of U2 college football shows, I'm quite sure you two would make the final cut. In fact, I think you both would be on there.
Well, I don't know if our director Bobby's listening there in the background. He will be mighty happy to hear that. The Mount Rushmore, Bobby, of YouTubers includes myself and Pigskin Pete, according to our current.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to work on who the other two might be. I might think with Steve Dace. I think he's one of my favorite guests that you're having.
Steve Dace is amazing.
Well.
Steve Dace is amazing. And before we move on with the conversation, you're making Bobby feel a little bit better that he's invested his time and his effort into something worthwhile, possibly. I tried to tell him otherwise, but he wouldn't listen to me.
I think Bobby's getting good bang for his buck. However, in addition to those things, I actually wanted. I felt like this is not that important a thing, but I also one of your guests is Justin Rowe. I know he's a fine young fellow. He's a pleasant personality and I think interesting guest. He made a comment about a couple shows ago. You had him. You were speaking about the new coaching staff. And I felt like there was something that he stated that I wanted to make sure was corrected. One of the things he said that.
Oh, unfortunately. Okay. Yakov 22, just call us right back. I was receiving a call on my phone with the other call-in number. So I thought somebody was confused in calling the previous call-in number, which is the other show number. And so I was just turning that off on my phone, and somehow that disconnected here. That seemed a bit odd. But anyway, we'll be here for a few more minutes. Please give us a call, 860-499 and 3332. So my apologies there. I'm sure that would have been a scintillating conversation about, our Michigan guy, Justin Rowe. Mark Rogers TV, who's on the line? Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up for the night. And again, my apologies, Yakov 22. If you're in the live chat, certainly call us back. You guys know where you can find me. I'm here all the time. All right, Bobby, thank you so much for taking care of us tonight, as always. And we're going to wrap things up for another night of college football talk here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I'll be looking out for those bell notifications for when new content drops. So we will see everyone soon. And the next time live will be at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday.